So today we're continuing the 26th letter and Igeres HaKodesh. And Rabbi here is explaining an enigmatic statement in the whole Zohar, the section called Raya Mehemna, which says that which seems to say that the study of the revealed part of Torah, which is called Nigla in Hebrew, comes from the tree of knowledge of good and bad. And that is very, very difficult to understand. It's basically saying that this part of Torah that's bad, that can't be, but that's the implication. That's what he's here in this chapter here to address. And to get to the answer, he goes through many, many parenthetical and rhetorical remarks. So we have to go through them to get to the answer. So we're holding, I'm using the lessons in Tanya for now, just for this chapter a little bit. So the lessons in Tanya would be it's on page 125, the volume I'm using. The words begin, V'gam pilpul hakushios v'tirutzim. Moreover, we find that Rav Shimon Bar Yochai dealt considerably also with the argumentation of problems and solutions. What the Alter Rebbe is saying here is that don't tell me that Rav Shimon Bar Yochai of the Zohar didn't study Mishnah and dealt with all the issues in Mishnah, and nevertheless it says that he didn't make an interruption for Amida, from Tefillah, when he was learning Torah, because his Torah learning was his occupation called Torasai Umnasai, he didn't make an interruption for Tefillah. So what do we see? How great Torah learning is. So maybe you want to argue that the Torah learning of Shimon was only the Zohar, was only mysticism, was only Kabbalah. It's not true. That's what the Alter Rebbe is now showing us. It's not true. He learned Mishnah, Isser. He learned. So if it would be from the tree of knowledge of good and bad, of course he would make an interruption from that type of Torah learning for the Amida, for Tefillah. And since he didn't, is proof that his Torah learning was on a higher level, i.e. from the tree of life. This is the rhetorical question. Let's look inside. And also all of the questions that are associated with the negative side, and the spirit of folly, of impurification, we find all that by Rav Shimon. The Osik Beit Tuvei, he studied much of that. Even when he was in the cave. Moshe, you know that Rav Shimon had to hide from the Romans 13 years in a cave. On the contrary, you know why he merited receiving the oral tradition of mysticism of Kabbalah during those 13 years is because he was forced to hide to save his life, which was very painful. The pain itself was the springboard for receiving the higher revelation, the Kabbalah. And Alter Rebbe brings a piece of Talmud to support that. It says in the Gemara, Pinchas ben Yoyer, Reb Shimon said to a contemporary of his, Pinchas ben Yoyer, Akol Kushya, every question that Rabbi Pinchas asked, Chovdalit Piruke. He gave him 24 answers for each of his questions. V'omar lei, and Reb Shimon said to the Pinchas, Ilemoli roitini bikach, if I would have not seen you in this situation of hiding in the cave with the pain associated with it, with the suffering, I wouldn't be able to give you 24 answers to your one question. What does this piece of Talmud show us, Hillel? That the Tsar of the Myra caused him to be able to be mechadesh, to come up with new novelties in Torah, to the point that he had 24 different answers for one question. So this shows again that the Reb Shimon's Torah learning of Nigla, of Talmud, of Mishnah, was justified, not only justified, wanted, and pure. Not, God forbid, i.e. from the tree of life, not, God forbid, the tree of the knowledge of good and bad. Another parenthetical remark. Gam be'emes, in truth, al kol chikas akayim b'mayro he'b'teres b'shnayis. The Alter Rebbe says, what do you think they were learning most of the time? Reb Shimon and his son. It wasn't only Reb Shimon hiding. It was his son Reb Elazar. What do you think they were learning most of the time there? You imagine talking about the tunnels and the captives and everything that you guys are experiencing in Eretz Yisrael. We're experiencing as Jews all together. What were they learning there? They were learning most of the time Chassidus, Kabbalah. No. They were learning most of the time Nigla. Look what the Alter Rebbe says. Igeres, the primary involvement of their study, was the Torah of Mishnah. Tafrei Sidrei Mishnah, 600 Sidorim, orders of the Mishnah, HaKodesh, which was during their time till Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, who compiled the Mishnah in 6 orders. Right? In other words, until he compiled it, it was scattered. But it was a total of 600. The Ilu Sefer HaZoyar. So why can't we say the primary learning of Reb Shimon, the author of the Zohar, with his son was Zohar? Says the Alter Rebbe, because if it were the Zohar, Vahatikunim, and the section of Zohar called Tikunim, they could have finished that in 2-3 months. They didn't need to spend 13 years studying that. Surely, they didn't say something twice. They didn't repeat each other. You know, when you go to real scholars, real Talmid Chachamim, real good speakers, real talkers, real academic, they don't repeat themselves. Maybe you'll take an idea and bounce it this way and tweet it this way, but always trying to give some new nuance and new vision on the issue. So, the Alter Rebbe says, if their study would have been the Zohar and Tikkunim, it wouldn't take 13 years. In 2-3 months, they can finish it. Why? Because the style of the Zohar is clear, non kind of convoluted, non-challenging in the sense of pilpul. Pulpit means back and forth. Moshe Drucker says this, Rabbi Dalfin says this. How do you know where's Moshe coming from? Where's Dalfin coming from? What's Moshe's proof and what's Dalfin's proof? Why is Moshe's proof not good enough for Dalfin? Why is Dalfin's proof not good enough for Moshe? So that's called pilpul. You don't have that in Kabbalah. In Kabbalah, what you have is what we call hasbara, to elaborate and explain. There's for example, the infinite light of God is called Or Ein Sof. Why does it say Or Ein Sof? It should be Ein Sof, infinite. So then you have to ask yourself, what is Or? What is light? What's the symbolism of light? So we look at light, the sunlight, and we look at different aspects of the sunlight. So all of that is part of Kabbalah, but it's what we call clarification. Pilpul is not clarification. Pilpul is dissertation. Dissertation is very convoluted. It's argumentative. It's in the world of debate. That takes a long, long time. So when you have 600 Mishnahs, okay, and you have to debate 600 Mishnahs, it's going to take you 13 years. But when it comes to straightforward statements of Kabbalah, of the Zohar, it takes you 2-3 months. That's what he says here. Let's continue inside. Another rhetorical question the Alter Rebbe uses to prove his point that Torah is not from the tree of good, of knowledge of good and bad. Miyoyim shechorav Beis Hamikdash. The Talmud says, from the day that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Ein lo HaKodesh Baruch Hu el dalmadav shel halacha bavad. The only thing that's left since the destruction of the temple are the 4 cubits of Jewish law. So what do we see from here? That Jewish law and Mishnah is the predecessor, the prelude to Jewish law. Halacha is based on the Talmud, and Talmud's based on the Mishnah. So we see that all that's left today is Jewish law. God finds himself in Jewish law, and by extension in Mishnah. And you're going to tell me Mishnah is not godly? That's his next rhetorical question. Now he goes further. Look how you have over here in these words, Chevra, 3 times the word pella, which means wonder. There's yet further cause to be exceedingly amazed. Hafle. Again, twice the word hafle, 3 times. This is to underscore the amazement. It's like, wow, 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 something like that, okay? And what is he saying? I hope you're following, Chevra. If you don't, ask. I'm not a mind reader. So he says, how can there be the completion, the wholesomeness of Mashiach, that Mashiach Mashiach shouldn't have to, that Mashiach should not have to know the details of those things that are permissible and forbidden, vituma v'tara, impure and pure. In other words, if we argue that part of Torah is from the tree of knowledge, from good and bad, when Mashiach will come, there'll be only good. That means some part of Torah will dissipate, will go away, will be revoked. How can you say that? That's as good. How can you say that? Look what he says. Ki eich yishchut ha'karbonos. How will we slaughter sacrifices in the temple during the time of Mashiach, the gam chulin, and also ordinary things, im lo yoidu hilchos drasa v'cholda v'shia, if one won't be aware of the laws of the knife used by the shochet, pressing, passing, and pausing. These are all details of how you're supposed to halachically shecht an animal. If you stop in middle of the slaughter, of the cut, it's called shia. It invalidates the animal, and I've seen it. I was once in the slaughterhouse, and I saw it, and I'm not a shochet, but I knew enough to say, wait a minute. And I went over to the mashgiach, and I said, I didn't like something I saw. He was supposed to give a cut straight, and instead he cut, and he stopped, and then he went back. Isn't that a problem? Right? And so too, there's laws of pausing, of pressing, and passing, different details. The point is, if you don't know those details during Mashiach's time, guess what? the animal that's going to be slaughtered by the slaughterer, by the ritual slaughterer, by the sheichet, is invalid. It's puzzle. You're not allowed to eat from that meat, Moshe. It's considered treif, non-kosher. And by the way, all of these details are to lessen the pain of the animal and to do the process in the most hygienic and peaceful way, contrary to Peter's argument, just for the record. So he says, Hapoisel b'shchita. All of these things, if not done properly, invalidate the shchita. Upegimas hasakin. The fourth thing is it's called the dent. If there's a dent on the knife, the blade has to be smooth. If you ever noticed, someone who's a shochet has a long nail. Because with one of those, with his long nail, he's able to put it on the knife and to go like this to see if it's glatt, if there's no indent on the blade of the knife. If there's an indent on the blade of the knife, it's an invalid knife. And when a shochet comes to a rav, to a rabbi who knows these laws, for his approval, that his knife, it's called stellen dem chalef. Stel, it's Yiddish meaning preparing your knife for shchita. That's a most important detail in a sheichet's kosher sheichet who knows what he's doing. So the rabbi will take his nail and he will check if the blade of the knife is good, or he'll ask the sheichet to do it, and then he'll do it as well to see if the sheichet has it right. So that's what we're talking about here. That's the words, what it means over here. Look in Tanya, upegimas hasakin. So you need to know all these laws: pausing and pressing, and pressing, and the smoothness of the blade. And that's going to be in the Beis HaMikdash after Mashiach comes. How are you going to know that? You got to learn Mishnayos. You got to learn law. Messiah here, Messiah there. If you don't learn law, you're not a good sheichet during Mashiach's times. So the Alter Rebbe's proof is, what do you mean that Mishnah and Halacha, there's a part that is impure from the tree of bad and good? It's all good. You need it. These are his questions that he's asking on that initial statement that he mentioned. He started the chapter with from Raya Mehemna and the Zohar. Let's continue. And Alter Rebbe asks a question. Can you find me a man who's born with a nature that shechts in a way, that slaughters in a way without pausing and pressing? In other words, the shochet has to train himself how to shecht. It's not, every Tom, Dick, and Harry could be a shochet. And by the way, we had this here in America, in Chicago, in Philly, in Baltimore, in New York, in Boston. You know, a large part of writing, corpus of writing, is about scandals in the 20s and 30s in American cities with shchita. To the point that Rabbi Soloveitchik, the Rav, Rabbi Yashaber Soloveitchik, was almost imprisoned because he stood up after he came to Boston in 32 and he saw the terrible situation, how people who didn't know what they were doing were slaughterers, and then it went into the kosher stores and it said the sign, Basar kosher. Take a look on, you can see pictures on the web from such stores in the 20s and 30s, and it was treif. Why was it treif? Sometimes because the sheichet didn't know what he's doing. He didn't know how to do these things that we're discussing here. Other times he did, but they took in treif meat. I mean, it was terrible. Scandals, big scandals, big scandals. There are books written about this. And the mafia was involved. So, of course, they put pressure on the Jews who were behind this. And with the unions, this was a very, in New Jersey, this was a large issue in our communities and all from where we all come from. Okay? So the Alter Rebbe says, you're not born with a natural tendency to know how to shecht an animal. You have to train yourself. So if you don't have the training, I don't care if you're around during Mashiach's times, you won't be a good sheichet. Your shechita will be invalid. So obviously you need to learn the laws. So the laws are holy and they're only good, not bad, God forbid. That's his point. The gam asakin tia b'riyah v'medes b'li b'kimas loylam. Oh, and the knife shouldn't have any dents. V'oid harbe alochas chelev adam, the fat and the blood, v'shari surin, and other prohibitions. The gam tumas hames, and also the laws surrounding a corpse, a body. Yitzrichem leida will need to know. K'dechsiv hanar b'mei shona yomus. The lad will die at the age of 100. The gam tumas yoyled is tzarech leida. The Alter Rebbe is showing different laws that will be necessary to know. The laws of a woman after she gives birth, she becomes spiritually impure until she goes to the mikveh. D'chsiv hara v'yoledes yachdov. She will be pregnant and give birth together. If a woman will give birth every day, resulting from one marital union, in time to come, pregnancy will not last 9 months. 1 second. Hillel. Look at this chavra. Listen to this, because this is something very interesting to know. I mean, we're all pretty much, done with having kids, I think. Anyway, in time to come, pregnancy will not last 9 months. On the same day that a woman conceives, she will give birth. Moreover, additional children will be born on successive days from that same conception. Yes, Hillel, what do you want to say?
We went by a line quickly that I didn't understand.
Which one?
Hanar ben Me'ah Shana Yamut. What are we talking about there? Some kind of reference from the Navi, but I don't know what it's referring to. We've been talking about the laws of the knife and so on.
Right. No, he's giving other examples. The Alter Rebbe is giving examples.
So what's the example here?
The example here is that the laws of impurity will be relevant even during that time. Even during the Messianic time.
Called a nar, 100 years old. The implication being we'll live so long that 100-year-old will be called a nar. Is that what the idea?
No. That even someone, he's called a nar, even though he'll die at 100, but he's impure. In other words, the point out there wants to be that you have to know the laws of.
Meaning there'll still be death and there'll still be impurity from death.
Okay, and that's a question that I was thinking. Because as far as I know, when during Mashiach's time there won't be death, so it could be he means the first stage. There's different stages, so probably he means yes, there'll be death at the Messianic time. There's different periods that the Rambam writes in his halachas of Hilchos of Mashiach. So I assume what he means here that even during the Messianic age, the first stage, there'll be death, and you'll need to know the laws how to deal with it, because the body will be impure. So if you argue that in Mashiach's time there's only good, so how could there be impurity still left from the body that dies even at the age of 100? Is that clear?
Okay.
Is that clear?
I think so.
And that's why he gives now another, and he gives now another example. This example that a woman, even though it says during Mashiach's time a woman will give birth right away, not 9 months, but still at a certain stage in Mashiach's during that period, she'll have to bring a sacrifice because she'll be impure and go to the mikveh. The point that he's making is he's giving us examples showing that Tuma and Tara will still be applicable during a certain stage during Mashiach's time, and therefore you cannot to argue that part of Torah is considered impure is wrong. That's his point. Because if it's well, go ahead. What?
We just flipped out for a moment, so I didn't hear the last minute or so.
I said that he's bringing these different examples in halacha that they will apply even during the first stage of Mashiach's coming. So therefore, you need to be knowledgeable in those laws. And if we are to accept the enigmatic statement of the Zohar that we began the chapter, that part of Torah is from the side of good and bad, well, and the part that's bad is associated with these laws of defilement and impurity, then why is it relevant during the time of Mashiach? And the answer is because it's not bad; it's only good. And the Torah wants us to deal with the death and the nida and all of that. That's his line of thinking throughout the chapter. Nevertheless, the laws with respect to the restrictions resulting from her impurity will not change, and therefore you need to know the laws. The Alter Rebbe says there's no need to dwell on something that's so obvious. It's public knowledge. The reverse is public knowledge, that the reverse meaning that it is important throughout Shas and Medrash. The Parech, and he's bringing more proof. The Hilchos HaMashiach, the Talmud, there's a question, a law for the time of Mashiach. In other words, the Talmud sometimes will ask, what you're saying seems to be applicable only when Mashiach comes. So why is it relevant now? So what do we see from that question of the Talmud? That the law is relevant to the time of Mashiach. Then the Talmud wants to know why we're worrying about it now. And whatever the answer is, it's not relevant right now. But the question itself is indicative that this is pure and it's valid and it's only good. And that's why it'll apply even during Mashiach's time. Elijah will come to clarify all doubts. This is all from the Talmudic statements. This section will be clarified and expounded upon in the future when Mashiach comes by Elijah. Move in. Another thing that the Alter Rebbe says that I said earlier that the Zohar says that's not comprehensible, it's difficult to understand Mashiach. Quote, the Zohar says, scholars, Torah scholars, won't be sustained by ignoramuses, and not by the mixed multitude. The ochlim posel tomim ve'osur, who eat something that is unfit, impure, and prohibited. Chas v'sholem, God forbid. So the Alter Rebbe says, wait a minute. We find during the Second Temple, the scholars, the Talmid Chachamim, didn't depend on their survival from the ignoramuses, the ochlim posel, the osur chas v'sholem, who eat that. Sharei Talmid Chachamim Hoylem Sodas Ukramim. During the second temple, the second Beis Hamikdash, everyone knows, they were wealthier. They had their own vineyards. They had their own fields. Just like the ignoramuses. And even so, the Talmid Chachamim were involved in studying the laws of things that are prohibited and permissible, the tomb of Atara and impure and pure. All the pairs of the sages who lived at the time of the second temple, and they raised disciples in thousands and 10,000s. And that's what they taught them openly. The other stuff, the Kabbalah, was concealed. So we see from this that the Torah scholars need not be sustained by the illiterate, by the ignoramuses, which therefore you would think you wouldn't study those laws. That's the Alter Rebbe's point. Don't tell me the Zohar seems to say that you know why that there is some negativity to certain parts of laws because it's associated with the ignoramuses, with the Ami Ha'aretz. So the Alter Rebbe says, I'm sorry, during the second Beis Hamikdash, the Talmid Chachamim had their own fields and vineyards and were wealthy. They didn't have to come on, and they still learned those laws. The point, all of this is to this finalizes kind of his questions on the Zoharic statement. Tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem, will begin learning the answer. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Hatzlacha. Bye.